Hello, I'm Dan Lawson, and thank you for joining us here at Take Notice, where we examine public safety issues facing our community. Today, we're talking about recreational marijuana and what that means for our neighborhoods. Voter-approved Proposition 64 legalized the recreational use of marijuana in California as of January 1st. But it has people asking a lot of questions. Who can sell it? Who can buy it? Where will people be allowed to smoke? And how will the law be enforced? Here to help answer those questions and to make sense of the new law is Andrew Berthelsen, San Mateo County's Proposition 64 Implementation Coordinator. Welcome, Andy.
Thanks.
First question, what are the new laws? I know that we generally mention January 1st, but I think that needs some clarification.
Sure. So Prop 64 was passed over a year ago, November of 2016. And at that time, a couple things happened almost immediately. One was for adult use, recreational use was suddenly legal, and it had not been before. For personal use, you were also allowed to cultivate up to 6 plants at your house almost immediately. And so for the last year, the state has really been focused on trying to figure out not the personal side, but the commercial side. And so January 1st of 2018, the state regulations for commercial businesses, both for recreational and medicinal, went into effect. And now we're starting to see for-profit businesses in the state of California along both those lines.
Great. And do they differ from California state laws previously? I know you touched on that already.
Sure. So every city and every county in the state of California is allowed to come up with slightly different rules. They can prohibit all of these commercial businesses. They can regulate to a certain degree where you grow those 6 plants for personal use. They can also decide that they want to allow everything. And so the cities around the state, the counties, the cities here in San Mateo County, they've each been studying this issue on their own this past year. And so they've each been able to come up with kind of their own local rules, their own regulations, or their own prohibitions for the current basis. Yeah.
So thank you, and that's something I think our viewers would be interested in. So each city or community can decide on their own, basically, what they're going to do with regard to these new marijuana laws?
That's correct. Under the prior language that the state legislature had passed, none of these businesses, for-profit businesses, were going to be allowed in a jurisdiction unless that jurisdiction proactively decided to permit them. That's what the legislature approved. But when Prop 64 went on the ballot, it kind of flipped that. And it essentially said if the city of Millbrae or San Mateo did nothing, then the state might actually issue licenses in those jurisdictions. Now, those rules have changed a little bit since by the state legislature and state regulations. And essentially now every city or county is supposed to provide the state with a copy of what the rules are so the state knows. And prior to the state processing an application, they can ensure that that applicant is in compliance with local law as well.
Interesting. So do we know, I know it's early,
yeah,
and I know you've got a lot of work to do, but where do we stand right now with regard to that different communities within San Mateo County? Are there any communities that in particular are aggressively pursuing the sales of marijuana and the growing of marijuana? So
there's been some variation. I would say the general census in San Mateo County is to take kind of a wait-and-see approach. The city which has been probably the most aggressive in this regard is the city of Pacifica. And this past November of 2017, they had a tax measure they put on their ballot locally. This is a city that already had 3 medicinal dispensaries under prior rules. And so they're looking at additional storefront brick-and-mortar dispensaries in that jurisdiction. Other cities have been more reluctant to look at that type of business activity at this time. Within the county itself, and so I can speak to the unincorporated parts of the county, the Board of Supervisors' approach was to focus at this time on very limited cultivation. And to maybe take a wait-and-see approach over the next year as we can evaluate these other types of businesses.
Good. And then how about focus now a little bit on individuals? So how's these laws going to affect, or this law going to affect individuals with regard to medicinal and recreational marijuana then specifically?
Yeah, so again, most people in California, over the age of 21, now can have 6 plants at home, and that can be regulated a little bit by either the landlord or depending upon the situation, if their city decides those plants have to be grown indoors or something like that. But they're allowed to do that. They're allowed to possess small amounts of marijuana. And if you have a medicinal card and you are above the age of 18 to get a medicinal card, you can have additional plants and things of that nature. So,
and then how about the medicinal is basically the same then, right? The way we've been dealing with it.
It's essentially the same product, up until the point of the consumer, and the reason for use. That said, the state does have a number of different licensing classes, and we can get into this, later. But they have separate and similar regulations for medicinal and adult use that they've tried to kind of combine.
Great. And how about, you touched on it a little bit, but how about the growers? What does this really mean for the growers? There's still a lot of question for the growers.
Yeah. So again, for the commercial growers, the state of California, part of the argument behind this was to push cannabis cultivation out of environmentally sensitive areas, places where cultivation was a danger, to the environment, but also to the communities around there. It was an illicit activity in rural areas where law enforcement was having a tougher time, merely enforcing existing law. And so the idea of moving this type of activity into a safer, more regulated commercial space, that was part of the argument behind Prop 64. I think the shift we will eventually be seeing is towards more mixed light greenhouse or indoor cultivation rather than these large outdoor grows. And from a public safety perspective, I think there's an argument to be made there as well.
So where can viewers get detailed information about the laws?
So I would recommend that anyone who's interested in learning more contact their own city, because again, these rules can vary by jurisdiction, and they can also change over time. I mentioned a number of jurisdictions are taking a wait-and-see approach. It's possible that there will be additional study sessions in various cities over the course of the next few months. But yeah, it's important to know what your local rules are because they can vary depending upon a few blocks, whether you are allowed to in fact grow 6 plants at home or outdoors or something like that. So contact your city or the county if you live in an unincorporated area.
And speaking about those laws, with regard to criminal laws, with regard to carrying, I know with alcohol, carrying an open container of alcohol within a passenger area is not legal. It must be loaded in a trunk. Do you know how the rules apply for marijuana or how they compare?
Yeah, so some of that's still being worked out to a certain degree. The primary rule of thumb here for recreational marijuana is you're allowed to have up to 1 ounce of product on you, or 8 grams of concentrate. There are some general senses of how that should be stored. I mentioned you can only have the 6 plants. So again, if you're returning with those to your home, you're allowed to have those in your vehicle as well. Yeah, those are the general sense. You're not supposed to have an open container similar to alcohol, in the passenger part of it. Certainly aren't supposed to be consuming while you're driving.
Right.
So those rules are all in place.
Good, and still trying to fine tune it, I would imagine.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, which is understandable. The other question we had was had to do with driving unsafely. Let's say somebody was stopped, and I know that's been the question for law enforcement for years now, especially in states that have already legalized it, with regard to how do we determine whether somebody is under the influence. With alcohol, it's 0.08 and maybe even below, depending upon whether you drive a taxi or some truck. So do you know what those rules are currently, or the laws?
Yeah, so the state of California did not adopt a blood alcohol content limit for cannabis. Essentially, it's similar to how it is now, where it's up to the discretion of the law enforcement official to either ask for a blood test or to do a field sobriety test. The state is hoping to have a standard on this someday, and so there is a state excise tax being collected on cannabis activities. Some of that money is supposed to go towards researching this topic and better understanding it. It's something that again, the state's going to invest some time and money into, and I'm sure that the CHP and other law enforcement will be working to develop a more uniform standard on some of this.
Right. So more to come.
More to come.
Okay. And another question I had that was in my mind is with regard to adults buying alcohol for minors. Will there be similar type of laws for legal marijuana purchases?
Absolutely. Those rules are already in place. Essentially, you're contributing to the delinquency of a minor, I believe is how they call it. And those rules are in place. And so while it is legal for an adult to purchase, and it is legal for them to give it away to another adult, giving away cannabis to a minor remains illegal in the state of California.
Great. And my last question is, can people under the age of 21 or 18 also have a medical marijuana card?
So to get a medical card in the state of California, you do have to be above the age of 18. The one difference between kind of the advantage to the person between 18 and 21 is adult use is limited to 21 and above. So if you are under the age of 21, you are not allowed recreational cannabis. From a county health perspective, obviously encouraging people below the age of even 25, encouraging folks to avoid consumption because there are heightened risk under the age of 25. But medicinal use above the age of 18 and adult use above the age of 21.
Well, this has been very informative. And we've heard a lot from Andrew with regard to criminal law. And I understand that Andrew also has a great deal to share with us with regard to the business aspect of marijuana and the sales, businesses, opening, growing the product, et cetera, et cetera. So when we come back, we're going to talk about that.
Hi, I'm Lisa Charney, and it's raining. So I'd like to talk to you about sandbags. Sandbags are used all around the world to reduce water damage to property like yours. For today's quick tip, I'll show you how to use them properly and then give you addresses and a map where you can get free sandbags from cities in our area. Sandbags should be filled only 50 to 70% full so that after the bag is closed, the sand can move around to fill in the nooks and crannies and make a better seal. And if you're unable to tie the bags closed, this extra space gives you enough material to fold the bag over and use the weight of the bag to seal the sand inside. Sandbags should be used to divert the flow of water rather than to create a dam. Notice where the path of water is and place the bags on the uphill side to move water away from your home and toward the street. And remember to not divert water to your neighbor's property. If you're double stacking, don't place the second layer directly over the first layer. They should be alternated like bricks, and then walk on top of them to force the sand into a tighter seal. Residents and property owners can get free sandbags in Brisbane, Burlingame, Hillsborough, Millbrae, San Bruno, and San Mateo at the addresses shown on the screen. Be prepared to show proof of residency or ownership. Click below our video for more information, and thanks for watching Take Notice Quick Tips.
Welcome back to Take Notice. We're here with Andrew, and we're going to ask him a few more questions with regard to marijuana, the laws, marijuana laws, and business practices, how the new law will affect business practices. So the first question I have, Andrew, is can businesses set up shop anywhere?
So no. The first thing to think about is whether the business activity someone wants to engage in is even allowed in the jurisdiction they want to set up in. So, for instance, if this particular city only allows dispensaries and not a manufacturing facility or cultivation facility, then there's no chance that they can set up shop there if the city prohibits those activities. Once you have local approval, you then need to get a state license. So there's kind of a two-step process. In terms of where they can be located, those can vary by jurisdiction. The default at the state level is any licensed business, whether it be a dispensary or a manufacturing facility, is supposed to be 600 feet from a school or licensed childcare facility. Those rules can change at the local level, and so in some places you've seen those setbacks pushed much greater distances. You've seen other types of locations added to that list, so they also can't be close to certain playgrounds or churches or something. So those rules are going to vary by jurisdiction.
Right. Any more specific requirements that our viewers would be interested in? For example, those maybe state or local requirements for somebody to set up shop?
Sure. So again, a local jurisdiction can go above and beyond whatever rules are applied by the state. But if you can't meet the state licensing requirements, you aren't going to get a license. Mm-hmm. So, the state wants to get financial information on folks. They want to make sure that folks don't have a felony history on certain things in order to be eligible for a license. And so there are various restrictions at the state level, part of the screening process. For a permanent state license. Not all of those requirements are being reviewed for temporary licenses the state has issued, which is why a number of local jurisdictions are trying to put in tougher restrictions.
And this is a question some of the viewers might be asking themselves at this moment. Do we have any shops open yet in San Mateo County, open for business? So there are 3 pre-existing medicinal dispensaries in the city of Pacifica. Again, the city of Pacifica is likely to look towards or moving towards more and adult use dispensaries. Mm-hmm. There has not been widespread movement towards dispensaries in the county of San Mateo. What there has been is, in some places, an acceptance that delivery sales will be ongoing. Mm-hmm. And so that's something that a number of jurisdictions allow. Mm-hmm. And it's important for folks to talk about or to look at what their local rules are. Mm-hmm. In the county of San Mateo, in the unincorporated areas, the one type of commercial activity we are allowing is limited cultivation. And it's restricted to greenhouses, and those facilities have to be set back significantly from not only schools and child care facilities, but also residential zones. So we're really looking at that only in truly agricultural rural areas. Mm-hmm. But different cities are looking at potentially manufacturing facilities, testing facilities, and so just because things don't exist now doesn't mean at some point in future years that these businesses may not have an opportunity here. But at this point, right now, sales would be strictly related to on-site. Is that correct? For example, now with alcohol, you can order, wine or whatever by mail. Mm-hmm. But currently, everything's at site, as far as you know. No,
the state has established a licensing process for delivery. The delivery operation has to have an actual brick and mortar location somewhere. They don't have to necessarily do retail sales there, but they need to have a site. So it can't just be a mom and pop type shop. Mm-hmm. Anyone who delivers product has to be an employee of that business pursuant to the state regulations. So it can't be like a Lyft or an Uber where you're kind of mm-hmm. independent contractors delivering, or mm-hmm. UPS or U.S. mail is obviously still mm-hmm. illegal mm-hmm. for delivery purposes. And there are various restrictions that the state has put in place to verify the age of the recipient mm-hmm. and to ensure that delivery happens to a fixed address. So, those are rules at the state level. I think that's something we may see more of
mm-hmm.
if
at the county level.
At the local level, if there is a reluctance to see storefronts, mm-hmm. then I think you may see more of that.
Oh, yeah. Interesting, very interesting. Now, what sort of problems, if any, is the county trying to address when it comes to marijuana sales? For example, with banks, things like that.
Well, there are a lot of problems. I would say banks and the financial side of it is not one we're going to solve at a local level. The state controller, banking interests, local governments, they've been looking at this issue. It really is a federal concern more than anything else, like a lot of the problems with entering into this business space. Mm-hmm. That would be the federal hurdles. Locally, I think our biggest concern is some of the health impacts in communities, and that's something County Health Department, Public Health is really focused on. Mm-hmm. But the financial side is, that's a tough hurdle. Mm-hmm. I think, particularly when financial institutions are concerned about federal prosecution, and they're reluctant to bank with folks. You've seen a number of dispensaries historically, primarily cash-based. Mm-hmm. Some have entered into the financial markets using either state-sanctioned and or non-federally insured financial institutions. Mm-hmm. So that may be something that those businesses choose to do going forward.
We're still working on that.
Yes.
How about taxes? That's something that's, I'm sure many of us are interested in too. Who's going to pay for this? Who's going to be taxed? Is it going to be on the product? Is it going to be on the grower? Some of these type of questions.
Yeah, so there's a number of taxes in place. The first one in the supply chain is on cultivation, and there's a state excise tax on cultivation. It depends upon the dry weight of whether it's flower or leaf material, and that's statewide. The state's collecting that, goes into their excise tax bucket. The state is also collecting a large 15% excise tax on sales. So all of that revenue is going to the state. At the local level, retail sales, you're automatically supposed to be getting local sales tax. Now, the local sales tax is not your full 8.5% or 9%. It's a smaller share than that. But if there is a retail sale in your jurisdiction, you are entitled to sales tax. That only applies to adult use sales. So medicinal sales, like other medicinal sales or food sales, are not subject to sales tax. They are subject to the excise tax, so that 15% does apply to medicinal sales.
So that's similar to what it is now with prescription drugs,
yeah.
things like that, food.
There's also the capacity for local governments to add additional excise taxes. And so, in some jurisdictions where they've allowed cultivation, they've had additional, per square foot or per ton taxes, or additional 3 or 4% or 5% sales tax on top of whatever they would either be collecting on retail sales. So it varies by jurisdiction.
Yeah. And that looks like that's the way it's going to be until we work all of these things out. And once we get some good models, possibly people can learn from each other.
Yeah.
One last question, and you need to get your crystal ball out for this one.
Okay.
How does the county expect to see marijuana sales develop, if at all, in the next year or 5 years? Is there a county long-range plan, or is there philosophy?
No, I think the general county approach has been to take a wait and see on all of this. I think there's a lot of cause for concern as this new regulatory scheme gets set up. There's a lot of uncertainty with the federal situation we mentioned briefly. I think the only thing I would personally predict short term is, we will probably see more of these delivery sales. There are some public safety concerns with that. There are some health concerns with that. But I think that's probably what we'll see more of. There are neighboring jurisdictions where they've been far more aggressive in allowing dispensaries. So I think we can probably anticipate that San Mateo County residents will continue to go down to San Jose or up to San Francisco if they want to go to more retail environments. We'll see. It's a changing scene right now. So
right. Wait and see, not jumping right into the water full bore. Great. Well, you shed a great deal of light on this subject for us, Andrew, and I really do appreciate you being here with us today. And we can look forward to having you back, hopefully, to answer some of these questions in response to how the law develops. And thank you, all of you, for tuning in to Take Notice. Stay up to date on all of our latest episodes by visiting mctv.tv and following MCTV on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. And please send topic ideas to Take Notice at mctv.tv. Thank you, and have a safe day.